Welcome to Thrivers Ed, the podcast that's all about giving you the practical, no-nonsense advice you need to level up your life and business. I'm your host, Marcy Rossi, success coach, business strategist, and alcohol-free enthusiast. If you're ready to crush your goals, optimize your productivity, and live your best, most authentic life, then you're in the right place. Each week, we'll dive into topics like the psychology of success, practical strategies to boost your performance, and the unexpected ways living alcohol-free can elevate your life. Whether you're looking to boost your business, improve your health, or simply become a better version of yourself, Thrivers Ed is here to help you do just that. So grab your iced coffee, buckle up, and let's get thriving. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Thrivers Ed. Today, we are talking about starting your podcast and in particular, using this as a means of lead generation or building your audience. And I have an expert with me today. We've got Alesia Galati. Alesia is a podcast strategist and the founder of Galati Media, which is a full-service podcast management agency. She's driven by her passion for audio storytelling and has helped numerous coaches, thought leaders, and businesses launch and grow their podcasts. Now, Alesia believes that everyone has a story to tell, and she's dedicated to empowering others to share their voices with the world. And that's why I really wanted to bring her on, because if you've been thinking, well, what am I going to say on a podcast and who's actually going to listen to me? Those are some problems we are going to tackle today. So, Alesia, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. Any chance that I get to talk podcasting, I'm here.
Well, tell me tell me about that. How did you get into podcasts? Where did this business and this passion come from?
Yeah, so I started listening to podcasts back in 2015, I want to say. And I had a relatively longer commute than I had before. And I was finding that they were kept playing the same 3 songs on the radio. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is getting out of hand, right? Like, I'm so sick of this. And so I was on this, at this time, it was Google Play Music. I was on my Google Play Music and they had podcasts. And I was like, what is this podcasting thing? And the first podcast I listened to was Stuff You Should Know. And I am a lifelong learner. Like, I love learning anything new. And I was like, oh my goodness, they take a topic and they just explore the history of it, things that you probably didn't know about it, and stuff you should know about this topic. And I was like sold right away. And I worked in manufacturing at the time, manufacturing and supply chain. And it was about 150 guys to about 5 women in the facility that I worked in. And so I go to my boss and some of my coworkers, I'm like, this podcast thing. And they're like, what in the world are you talking about? Like, you're crazy. Podcast what? Fast forward to 2018. So by 2018, I had already been a guest on several podcasts talking about postpartum depression because I had postpartum depression after having my first kid. So talking about postpartum depression, just trying to bring more awareness. And this is like right before Chrissy Teigen was like, postpartum depression is a real thing, right? Like it just wasn't really talked about. And so it was kind of like this secret thing that moms were talking about in like kind of in DMs and kind of in mom Facebook groups. And so I was like, I want to get this message out there more. Started talking about postpartum depression. In 2018, launched my first podcast and thought, okay, I could do this, talk about supply chain stuff for small e-commerce businesses, the stuff I was doing in my day job, because there aren't a lot of e-commerce podcasts at all. So I launched that podcast and realized fairly quickly I did not like talking about this topic at all. In 2019, I launched my second podcast called Two Sisters and a Cult with my sister, where we talked about cults from the lens of having grown up in one, which that's a whole nother story for another day. I know usually people are like, wait, can we go back to that? If we have time. Right?
I'm like about to pause you. Like, I need to hear more about this, but I'm gonna let you go. Keep going. Okay, so Two Sisters and a Cult.
Yes. So from the lens of having grown up in a cult. And it was really about asking the question, why? Because my mom had passed away into the early 2019. And it was our way of exploring the question of why did we join that cult? I don't understand it. And so we were able to kind of dive into the psyche of why these people were joining these cults, relating them to the cult that we grew up in, and like kind of the motivations behind these leaders. And I will have to say that was the podcast that really showed me the impact that podcasting can have on the listener, because we would get DMs at least every other week that would say, oh my goodness, me too. I grew up in a cult too. And like it blew my mind just because the felt so solitary, especially because it was a small, unknown one, right? It wasn't like a big one where everybody knows about this or there's a documentary on this. No, it was just a small community that was very cult-like. And so from there, I was like, oh wow, this is the difference that I feel like I want to make in the world, which I think really does tie into having grown up in a cult because being able to use my voice, being able to now amplify the voices of others when it has been historically silenced is just, yeah, it lights me up and gets me so excited. So, podcasting. And then in 2020, I lost my job due to COVID. I was like, all right, I have quite an amount of years having built up relationships with other business owners, being in the online business space. I have a marketing degree. I think I could do this podcasting thing for other people, but I wanted to be kind of a one-stop shop. So someone records and then I do the rest. So I reached out to my network. I said, hey, I lost my job. Does anybody want to launch a podcast? I want to see if this is viable. And the person who was my very first client is still with us to this day, which is just so extremely special. And since then, we have launched and produced over 50 shows. We have anywhere from 10 to 15 weekly shows, depending on the time of the year. And it's me and two other women. And yeah, it's just been really incredible. So I've had five at this point, five podcasts. I love podcasting.
Wow, I'm still struggling to keep up with all the pieces that are in mine. I think until you do it, you don't realize how many little things there are. And so having someone really take that off your plate, I can understand why your client is like, no, I'm not leaving you. Like,
Right.
please keep doing the thing. I'll talk and then you fix everything else. So I think I know the answer to this question, but because you say everyone has a story, but I'm curious if you would think that there are people that are not maybe not it's not that they're not appropriate for a podcast, but maybe a podcast is not their next right step. And to give you some background on this question, I've heard conflicting advice between people of like podcasting is a great way to grow your audience and to get leads and clients, etc., and other people to be like, no, it's a way to nurture people that are already there, but you're not going to grow your audience really huge. So very convoluted question, but the idea there is, who is this maybe not right for?
Yeah. So there was a big name business person who has courses on courses on courses. Could probably guess who I'm talking about. They had said a couple years back, everyone who has a business should have a podcast. I disagree. I think that we all have a story to tell, yes, but I don't think that everyone should have a podcast. If you are not making the money in your business that you need to be making to be able to keep your business sustainable, a podcast is not going to fix that. So focus on selling, focus on growing your business, making the amount of money you want to make. And then as you have already like you're clear on your messaging, you know your audience, you know what they're struggling with. From there, that is a great place to then start guesting on other people's podcasts to decide, do I even like talking out loud, right? You might be someone who likes to blog or do short lives, or like there's tons of other things that you can do to nurture and grow your audience. If you discover, oh man, this is so much fun. I love talking into a microphone. I like talking to myself. Or if you have someone like me, I like talking to the production company, right? Like we would have clients where they would literally stop in the middle and be like, Alicia, my cat just jumped on me. Give me a second. So like if you're fine with that, then you can hire somebody to help you. But from there, then you can decide, okay, what do I want to do with this podcast? And a podcast is a great way to grow your audience. Just know that it is a long-term game. Think of it very similarly to if you were to start a YouTube channel today. What would your expectations be? It would be very similar with a podcast where it's a slow growth. You're going to want to make connections. You're going to want to interview the right people, collaborate, and all of that, and like really focus on the strategies to then slowly grow your audience to then say, okay, 3 years from now, here is my audience and here's what I've established. But if you're not making the money you need to be making yet, please do not start a podcast. That is not going to help or save or grow your business in a way that gets it to where you want it to go.
I have to say that was probably my favorite answer I have ever gotten from a question. in the history of my podcast. Now, I don't have 5 podcasts and doing this for, 10 years now, but the fact that you just, it was a mic drop moment, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but I definitely made faces over here, but it was like, don't do this if you're not making money, because there are a lot of people out there saying, okay, this is how you're making money, but how you make money is having conversations with people. Like you even said, when you were starting up your business, you reached out to people that you knew and you said, hey, does anybody want support with this? Do you know anybody who wants support with this? Like, this is what I'm doing, and here's how, I might be able to help you. And that is how you grow a business. Now, you can scale a business perhaps with a podcast. You can increase your reach, you can nurture people better, but it's not a one-to-one, if I do this, money is going to be coming in. And there are so
Right.
many strategies out there that really focus on, I think, these more impersonal pieces that feel like we're making progress, we're moving forward, and we're doing the thing. But the podcast itself is not going to be necessarily going to change your business from no clients, no audience, nothing to Amy Porterfield. Like that's just not the path. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so let's assume we've done some of the work behind our building our businesses. We have the capacity to add on yet another task. How do we, assuming we did not grow up in a cult, how do we find something to talk about? Like there are a million podcasts out there. It feels like everything has been covered. So how do we find like a fresh take or our own unique voice or style or whatever it is you call it?
Yeah, so that's where being a guest on other people's podcasts is really going to help you. So you can kind of determine what are things that I really enjoy talking about? What are some things that are like, I could talk about this for hours and we could literally keep going, which for me, that is podcasting, cults, and books, which if you can see my screen behind me, there's lots of books happening here. And so, like, those are the three things that I could literally talk about nonstop. Now, that might change, right? So, like, very similar to how I had that podcast where I said, I'm going to try this out. Let's see if it works. Actually, no, this is really boring and I don't like this at all. Give myself grace to say, okay, I'm going to stop that. And then I had like a year between where I stopped and then started the new one. So then what do I want to talk about now? What is something that I can talk about that feels really interesting? And then even from the cult podcast, we got to a point where we said cults are really depressing. And this is not really good for our mental health. We kind of achieved what we were trying to achieve. Let's move on. And I probably could have gone another 20 episodes, but I also was hosting with my sister and she was like, I can't do another 20 episodes. And so we dropped it and that's okay. And then from there saying, okay, what's next? Is it okay? It's launching other people's podcasts. And then I didn't start my podcast on podcasting for another year because my focus was the business growth and being a guest on other people's podcasts. And so you really just have to be strategic with it. Okay, one, can I talk about this a bunch? And then what is the goal that you're trying to achieve with your show? And I think that is really, really important. And that goal can change over the course of the time that you have your show. If your goal is, I want to increase my listenership and I want to increase the number of downloads I'm getting and the number of people that I'm reaching. Okay, cool. Now, here are the things that you need to focus on to achieve that. And maybe it's you have a weekly show, a bi-weekly show. That really does not matter. It's about what's the content that's in there that is shareable content that you're encouraging people to get the message out there. Now, okay, maybe your goal is to turn your listeners into leads. All right, how are we educating and kind of leading our listeners through that buying journey in those episodes so that they feel excited and ready to work with us? And you don't need hundreds or thousands of downloads to achieve a listeners to leads kind of flow. We had one client where they were very specific on who they were talking to. It was women in tech. So that was like the general, who were web designers, specifically WordPress web designers who wanted to have their own WordPress design business, creating WordPress websites for other people. So very specific. They had maybe 100-ish downloads per episode and sold out their group programs every time. Because it was very specific, very strategic, and the content that was in there was talking to their pain, was talking to the struggles that they were dealing with. So when people listened to the podcast and got on calls, it was like, no, I know you can help me. Please take my money, which was a very easy sell at that point. And they were strategic in where they were marketing it. But even from there, they were able to use the content in the podcast to then add benefits and bonuses to their course, to their group program, because they were able to say, hey, we're talking about this next week, go check out these episodes to get that baseline. So then they were able to build even better on top of the content. So there's so many different ways that you can use a podcast to create, grow your audience or to generate leads, but you really have to be very strategic with it, which is where if you're like, hey, I just want to talk about books, cool. Like just talk about books and have fun with it and know that, okay, maybe my goal is to increase my downloads from, all right, the first month, this is how many I got. In 6 months, I would like that to be doubled, right? So like just be really, I guess the best word for that would be like practical on what your goals are, but know that you still can use it to achieve goals.
I think that's a really interesting take on this because I was actually going to ask you about, your thoughts on formats and should you have a co-host? I know a lot of people think it's, kind of comforting to bring someone on initially to have someone there and what your thoughts are around there. Or does it matter if it should be solo episodes or guest episodes or what the mix is? But what I'm hearing from you is, regardless of those other pieces, what's most important is the actual content. And are we leading someone somewhere? Because whether or not you have a guest, if the core of the content shows why you're valuable, how you help people, and moves them closer on the buyer journey, you're going to get the ultimate result that you want. Is that kind of a fair summary of what you said?
Yes, exactly. Now, if you are trying to sell things, I highly recommend solo episodes because when you have a guest on, you're highlighting the guest in some way. Yes, you might drop little inclinations about how you maybe work with your clients or add some stories to add value to the conversation, but for the most part, you're there highlighting them. And so your audience is listening for them. But the reason that your audience is tuning in is for you. I mean, unless you're a celebrity, right? Which, like, okay, that could be a valid reason. But most of the time, they are there, the listeners are there and are tuning in every week because they want you. And we actually discovered this fairly early on with one of our clients. Every time she did a solo episode, it was like double the number of downloads. And I was like, okay, you need to do more solo episodes. She didn't like doing them, which we had to like, I was like, but the numbers are saying that your audience wants to hear from you. So how can we incorporate more of you? And maybe it's okay, maybe we don't need to do a full solo episode every month. Maybe at the end of every episode or at the beginning of every episode, you have your hot take moment and you're kind of like what you're learning this week. That way your audience can hear you. So if your goal is listeners to leads, highly recommend solo episodes. But there are still ways if you're someone who feels more comfortable with a co-host or with guests that you can kind of integrate that in. But that takes a little more nuance in being able to like have those conversations.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious. So you had mentioned that woman with a very specific niche, and she was only getting, 100 downloads an episode, but still it was fulfilling the goals that she had set. How then do we market it? Like, what if we don't have 100 people listening to our podcast? Like, tell me your thoughts on marketing your podcast.
Yeah, so marketing a podcast now is completely different than it was 5 years ago, which is very unfortunate and annoying. But really, it's about finding where your audience is hanging out. Maybe that's LinkedIn, maybe that is on X, maybe that's Instagram. One thing that I started doing specifically on Instagram is I will invite the guest to be a collaborator. And I'm not just saying new episode who dis because it does not work. Where the goal is to like move people from the app to your podcast. And that does not always happen easily or well. And so how can I make sure that I'm grabbing their attention, holding it, creating interest to hear more of the conversation? And so what I started doing is I will create a carousel that gives highlights or hot takes or hot tips from that episode. And then I'll have the person's face on the front so it shows that it's in collaboration with someone else. Then I'll ask them to be a collaborator on Instagram. And then either at the bottom of every single one of the slides or at the end of the slides, I'll have tune into the full conversation on the podcast and I'll have the cover art of the podcast. And then they can easily go to my link in bio to then go check it out. And I'm finding that that is working really well. Letting your listeners who are actually already listening to the podcast literally stop in the middle of an episode and say, If you're enjoying this conversation, share it with someone who you know is thinking about having a podcast. Like literally right now, Marcy's podcast. If you are someone who is like, I know someone who wants to launch a podcast, send this conversation to them because it will benefit them. It is helpful for them. That is like word of mouth is still one of the best ways because we trust our friends to know what we like or we don't like. So share it with a friend. So stopping that in the middle. Asking the guest to be a collaborator is really great. Tagging them in anything that you can. And then making sure that you're sharing it in all the places, right? So it could be not that you have to create brand new content for every place, but maybe you have three platforms. So if these are the places I'm going to share, I'm going to make sure that I have it specifically tailored to those bots. And then I'm going to make sure I share it in my email list. And I've given my guest everything they need to feel comfortable and confident sharing it. So maybe your episode, the guest episode goes live in 3 months. I don't remember what I talked about yesterday. So I need to know, hey, here are the things that you talked about. And so sending your guest an email, letting them know, hey, here are the things we talked about. Here's some copy you can use to share it. Here's some graphics to share it, etc. And that will also help to grow your audience by making sure that your guest has what they need to share.
Okay. And so we have a bunch of different ways that we can do things organically, and I want to dive into some of these in just a minute. But first, my question for you would be, do you have any experience and or thoughts on paid means of marketing your podcast?
So I don't have experience in that. I try my best, especially because we do so much like on the back end for our clients. I try to find all the ways that I possibly can to market a show without going that route of giving companies our money. And a lot of the companies, well, a lot of my clients, their values don't align with a lot of the like social media companies. And so giving them money is not really something they're interested in. So we try to find other ways, like collaborations. But I will say, and this is one thing that I did not mention, but is the number one way to grow your podcast is by guesting on other podcasts. Right? I mentioned before, if we're on Instagram, it's a fight, right? First, the platform does not want them to leave. Number one. So the algorithm does its thing. Two, they're on there for their dopamine hits, their cat videos, their controversial videos, whatever. They're on there for that. And so your content, yes, it can stand out and it can stop them, but does it move them through? Most likely not. And you also have to consider, is everyone who sees this a podcast listener? Most likely not. But by being a guest on someone else's show, one, you've hit podcast listeners. Two, you have 30 minutes to prove yourself to them as a guest, as someone who's interesting. And then at the end, when the host says, where can people find you, get to know you? Go check out my podcast. You're already on your podcast app. Go check it out. It's right over there. And so that's a quick and easy way. Now, we saw one client double and then double again her downloads with really strategic podcast guesting. So it does work. And we've seen it happen time and time again. So I would say that is like the number one way to grow your show. And the podcast community, especially if you're a host, it is so much easier to pitch yourself because one, you know what kind of pitches you like to receive, but also you're able to show up really well because you already are a host.
I love this answer because also, you talked really early on about how you want to get in front of where your people are, right? And so if you want people to listen to podcasts, find people that are listening to podcasts, right? If they're listening to someone else's, they're more likely to listen to yours. Whereas if they're scrolling on social media and it's a link to a podcast, like I'm not there to be listening to podcasts. I'm there to look at dog videos or whatever it is that
Right.
you guys do on social media. That's what I do, right? So, I think knowing where your people are and making sure that your strategies align with that is really important. And going back to something you had said earlier, I don't want to phrase this question as a way to discourage anyone from starting a podcast, but I do, as a podcast host, and you yourself, I'm sure, can recognize that and obviously the reason you built your business is it takes more than just sitting in front of a microphone and recording something or recording a voice note on your phone, etc. There is a title. You need to have a description. You have to have show notes. You have to, maybe you turn it into a blog. Maybe, like you said, you're sharing it out with people and making it really easy for them to promote if growing your podcast is important to you, and otherwise why are you just having this conversation with yourself? So can you give us an idea of maybe just the pieces that are involved, and in particular what you help people, what your company helps people with?
Yeah. So First, it goes into planning, right? Like, what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve with your podcast? Because then that determines the content you're creating. So once you decide, okay, this is the content I'm creating, maybe I'm going to do a 10-minute solo episode on a topic. Cool. Now, this is not even including guests and guest management or any of that. So I'm just going to keep it really simple and get through and just note the little changes if you have a guest. So maybe you need a guest management, but in this case, we have a solo episode. I'm going to, one, I got to make sure my family's quiet for it because audio quality is one of the most important parts of podcast listening. And if you do not have good audio quality, it is likely that new people coming to you, maybe your audience already knows you and they like you and they trust you and they're like, who cares, right? They're in the car today. It doesn't matter. But for new people coming in, they might have the expectations of what the audio quality should be. So make sure your environment is quiet. So I got to make sure my family's quiet and they know I'm recording for the next 40 minutes. From there, I have my script, or maybe I have an outline. I'm someone who likes to go by an outline because then I can kind of riff off of it. So I've got my outline, which I've already pre-done, right? That's work I already did it when I was planning the episode. I sit, I press record, I start going, and then I finish. From there, it goes to my team, right? And this is where like having a team or having someone help is really helpful. But this is what it would look like if I was doing it myself. Now I'm going to, because I do have a video and audio podcast, now it's going into a software like Descript, where I'm then going to go in, I'm going to add my intro card, like the video intro with the music. I'm going to add the video outro with the music. I want to make sure that it overlaps into what I start talking about. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to edit it. And with my company, we listen to every word. So it's not like some other production companies where they say pause for 3 seconds and we'll know that we need to cut something. We actually listen to every word. And if the guest says something that does not make sense or add value, or maybe they like go off on a tangent about a story that's like, what are we do? What are we doing here, guys? Then we cut that out because we want to make sure that the listener gets everything they need in the allotted time that they've given us. And so we cut it, we clip it, whatever. So now I've cut it down to what it needs to be a coherent message from the start of the episode to the end of the episode. Now I need to go in and I'm going to pick an SEO friendly. And when I say SEO for anyone who does not know what that means, search engine optimized, meaning Googleable. And so if someone is on their podcast app and they're searching for this topic, I want my episode to come up. If I do not do this part, I will not be able to find, these new people will not be able to find my podcast, which then lessens the ability to reach new audiences. So I want to make sure I have an SEO friendly title, an SEO friendly description. I also put it on my website. So now we're moving into audio and videos done. We're moving into the copy side. I put a blog post up on my website. And it's not just the show notes, it's an actual blog post. And so I take my transcript, I clean it up, I add headers, I do everything that I need to. Maybe I take out things that make more sense verbally spoken versus written, and I'll tweak those. So I've got my title, my description, my blog post. I also run it through a transcription service. So then I'm able, like, Descript does give you a transcript, but this transcription thing, I use Otter. It also has the ability to then use an AI bot to then create social copy or email copy or things that I'm like, all right, just give me a baseline. And then from there, I can edit it however I need to. It's not a simple copy and paste ever. Because usually, even if I say, put it in Alicia's tone, they're still like, woo, left field. So we got to make sure we edit what AI gives us. Just saying. So I have title, description, blog posts, social captions, and I try to ask for a few. Maybe it's connection or community building, or I'm trying to sell something, whatever it is. Then I'll also have the email copy because I want to make sure that I email it to my email list of like what the topic is that week. So that's my copy that I've got. Then I go into graphics. So because we want our podcast apps to showcase this, we want to make sure that we have the right graphics for this. So each episode has its own cover art. That's not your podcast cover art. It's like episode this number 192. Here's the guest's face. Here's my face, whatever. And then here's the title of that episode. So then I can have that in my player as well. So I have that. I have the carousel that I mentioned before, where I'm like, okay, here's all the steps that you need based on the conversation. I have my YouTube cover art that I need to make sure is created as well. And then I have like a quotable because I want to make sure that there's some nice, fun, fancy quotes for myself or my guest. I also add Pinterest graphics because on my blog, Pinterest is one of the number one drivers for my blog posts. And so I want to make sure I've got Pinterest graphics so then my automation on Tailwind can know, hey, these are new graphics for the blog. Let's go ahead and add these to her boards on that end. So from there, I have finished that. Now I got to post it. So I'm posting it on the app. I'm posting it on Buzzsprout, which is my podcast hosting platform. They then push it live to all the apps, depending on what day I schedule it for. Make sure I got my podcast description, my title, and my episode artwork. I then go and take the video and I'm putting the video up on YouTube. I'm scheduling the blog post. I'm scheduling the email. And then maybe I'm scheduling the social media posts, or maybe I decide to do those on the day that the episode goes live. From there, if I have a guest, I want to make sure I have that email scheduled out for the guest, letting them know, hey, this episode is ready to go. Now that's a lot. That is so much. And then we start over again, which is why I tell people it does not have to be every week. It can be every other week, right? Like you get to decide what that capacity, what your capacity is, or your ability to outsource things is to then determine, okay, I'm going to have it twice a week. I'm going to have it once a week. I'm going to have it every other week or maybe once a month, right? We've seen that too. Just also know that if you're once a month, your number of downloads are going to be a lot less than someone who has a weekly show that there's new content coming out regularly. So as long as you're aware of that, you get to decide what capacity looks like for you. And so our team handles everything from after you record. So you still manage your guests, you still decide on the guests, you can provide their email and we will send them all the assets. So using our templates and stuff like that at that tail end. But everything up to then at the recording's done, we handle everything from there. Now, also strategy is included because I don't just want to say, all right, you handed me the thing and it's not really achieving your goals, but okay, I'll do my work, right? Like that doesn't feel good to me. And so strategy, like monthly strategy is included of, okay, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Here are things that we can tweak. Here are things that we can change. Here are things we need to focus on a little better. It may be in the content side. Here are things we're doing on our end to make this side better. And so that's really important as well. So that is the stuff we handle.
I mean, it's a lot, right? And I think people they don't know what they don't know. And it's not until you dive into this. And I think that also goes back to your earlier point of like, don't do this if you're not bringing in money, because all of
Right.
those pieces take a lot of time. Actually, I mean, they don't. It's just a lot of pieces. Like, pulling show notes or a transcript and a title, you can use AI to support you, but
Right.
it's still a lot of things that you need to keep track of. And that's time that you're not working on revenue generating activities. You're not actually
Yeah.
selling anything from this particular step, and it doesn't require you to do it. And this is something I talk to my clients about all the time. It's just knowing where your energy is really best spent. And so, does this make sense for where you're at in your stage of business? And is it the best use of your time? Or what could you be doing in those 1, 2, 10, 20 hours to change what that bottom line actually looks like? So I think knowing that there are a lot of pieces, yeah, can seem scary, but there's definitely support for it. And I think people should go in eyes wide open into what it is that it's really involved, because
Yeah.
your podcast isn't going to take off if you do 1 or 2 episodes and you're like, oh, it's too much work. I can't do this, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just too much. I'm really interested in this strategy piece. So do you maybe have any examples from your clients where you, through working with them, were able to see? I mean, I know you actually already mentioned one where like they doubled and then doubled listenership again. Like tell me something that you've been able to see happen in your business.
Yeah, so when we were working with one client specifically, we do when we're launching with someone, which we do all the pieces of and like beginning to end and like help them and we do market research for it. And so one of the things in the market research that we found was like, they wanted to do a podcast on GMOs. And we're like, okay, cool. But from the market research, we were able to decide, actually, I think this would make more sense as a limited series. It does not make sense to have an ongoing show on GMOs. There are no ongoing shows on GMO. It's episodes here and there. And so, how can we make sure that one, we set you up for success because we don't want to promise something that does not make sense. But then also, here's some potential guests that you can have on and pitches you can make and etc. And so from there, it made one, it set us up for success because we were able to then do what we needed to do and get them the results that they wanted. But then also it allowed her to feel more comfortable and confident, like, okay, there's an end to this. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I think that a limited series or a shortened idea of a podcast is a great way to start if you don't have one yet and you're kind of thinking the idea over. Another person we saw that this was from a strategy session specifically, not from a client. She had a podcast that was over 250 episodes, and she was like, I am not getting clients from this. What do I need to do? I need to do something different because it's not working. What do I need to do? And I could tell from the conversation that her heart was no longer in her podcast. I was like, okay, well, what's your goal? Goal is to get clients from your podcast. Looking at the client, the guests you have on now, the content you're talking about now, I can understand why you're not getting clients because you're highlighting all these people and you're putting all of this effort and energy into making these connections, which might have served you 100 episodes ago, but is not your goal right now. I would recommend actually sunsetting that podcast and starting a new one that is solos only, right? Because she didn't want to keep doing it. If she was like, I love having these conversations, but it's not achieving, then I would say, all right, have a separate podcast that has the solo episodes or integrate them into every other week. She has solos, but her audience she had built on this one just did not translate to her business. And so I said, sunset this podcast and then start another podcast where it's just you talking about the things you do and really being able to understand, like, tell your audience what they're struggling with and how you help them. Within 2 months of launching her new podcast, now also remember, she had an established audience. She'd been growing her business already. She was able to get a client from that new podcast. And it was specifically someone who had said, I started listening to your podcast. Right. And so being able to see that through line. So things like that, where we talk about, okay, what is working, what is not, what makes sense for you as a person, or are there shifts that we need to make? I mean, we have several clients that have been with us for years. And so now we're kind of at that point where it's like, does a rebrand make sense? What do we need to do to shift to, because we're not the same people we were 3, 4 years ago. What needs to happen to make sure that our audience is still moving in the right direction and new people coming in understand what we're about, because it might not be what we were about 3 years ago. And so right now we're in that kind of strategy of like, all right, what needs to shift? What do those rebrands look like? Let's plan that out. How are we shifting the content? How are we letting our clients know, etc. So yeah.
Wow, that is a lot. I can see why you and your team would be so valuable because again, there's so many pieces, but it's not just like like a virtual assistant that's just going to cut out all the
Right.
ums and ahs. We're going beyond that to be like, well, who's actually listening to these ums and ahs on the back end, right? Like, why are we doing this? It doesn't make sense for us. Do we need to pivot? And is this aligned with our strategy and goals? I think that's fantastic. Alicia, this has been so fantastic. I've loved this conversation. Tell me if someone is thinking about a podcast, already have a podcast, whatever it is, what's your Thrive in 5 for today? What do you want them to take away?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing I want you to take away is get clear, whether you are about to launch, you're thinking about it, or you already have one. Get clear on what it is that your goal is. Next, I want you to decide on 10 episodes. Like, just come up with 10 ideas, even if you already have one. What are maybe 10 solo episodes that you could do that you feel comfortable and confident to talk about? And if you're like, actually, I don't, and you already have a podcast, then it might be time to sunset it and do something else. And that is okay. The next thing I want you to do is find your people. Are you marketing your content, or are you talking about your business in places that don't really make sense for what you're trying to talk about? Also, guest on some podcasts, whether you're thinking about it or you already have one. It is a great way to grow your audience, but it's also a great way to test out your message and see if it aligns with people. And from the conversations, you can ask the person, hey, can I get a transcript of this? And then you can create tons of your own content from the questions that that person asks you. And then finally, consider your capacity. I think so often as business owners and as content creators, we think I have to show up the same amount as someone else. But maybe you're burning yourself out and you need support or you need to dial it back, right? I don't think that everyone has to hire someone like me or should hire someone like me. maybe it's just a matter of dialing it back a little bit, taking a break, or batch recording so you do have capacity to take a break, kind of tap into your creativity, do something different. But consider your capacity. What is it, and where can you maybe get some support or move it back so you don't have to get support if that's not in your budget or doesn't make sense for you? So, those are my five.
I love that. Alicia, if someone is out there either thinking that they want to start a podcast and they want to get started on their right foot and not have to worry about a rebrand later, or they just want support looking at rebrand strategy, whatever those pieces are, and they want to connect with you, where should I send them? Give me all the places.
Yes. So, one, you can listen to my podcast called Podcasting Unlocked, and it's on whatever app you're listening to this conversation. So, definitely go check that out. And then, if you're someone who wants support around it, I'd highly recommend going to helpmypod.com. Try to keep it easy. Sometimes it's difficult to spell my name. So, helpmypod.com. I have 15 ways to improve your podcast if you already have a podcast, which is a free downloadable. And I also have a launch workshop that is free where I talk through kind of how it looks to launch, what are some things you need to consider, or you can always hire myself and my team to support you along the way.
Alicia, thank you so much. Okay, I have one last question for you, listeners. You can't see this obviously if you're listening to the podcast, but Alicia's wearing a shirt that says "I closed my book to be here," and I feel very honored as a past librarian. So tell me, what are you reading right now?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I just finished a book called Venomous by P. Fletcher. It is a dark sci-fi white shoes romance, kind of.
Okay.
And I read a lot of romance, probably around 250 books a year. I love to read. And so my husband got me this book or this sweatshirt for my birthday because he knows like if I show up somewhere, I close my book to be here. And so yeah, that's something I just finished and it was a doozy. It was 590 something pages. It was quite extensive. But I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars.
4 stars. All right, great recommendation. You put me to shame. I actually was in my Goodreads app this morning, and it's like you're at 35 books for the year, and I'm like, okay, so we gotta get this picked up. I used to read a lot more, and this is just inspiring me to go out and pick up something new. I think it falls off when all I'm trying to do is learn. If you read a lot
Yeah,
of business books, it can be really hard to fall back in, and it's just a great reminder that like not everything has to require your full attention. Like there's still
right.
some fun stuff out there that we can go do. Alicia, thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna make sure that all of your links are in the show notes, and it has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.